Hey everyone, back now here. I'm pleased to sit between Sergeant Don Gulla and Gary Drake, and we've got some great stuff coming up for you here. Now, they've been doing some classes here at the Concealed Carry Expo over the weekend that I hear have been very popular. You were explaining to me you had room for so many people, and you actually had like closer to double that amount.
We had a bunch.
And
saying it lightly.
And I know as an instructor, anytime you're trying to teach a massive class, especially one that's oversized and overfilled, that is a great challenge. But it sounds like you were teaching some really important and critical skills. And so let's talk real quick about, you mentioned to me just a minute ago, one of the hardest things about carrying a gun, carrying concealed especially, is that draw, mastering the draw. You know, it doesn't matter how good you can shoot if you can't get that gun out of that holster quickly and consistently, right? If you're fumbling, you drop the gun, you're hosed. There's nothing happening there.
And those reps, especially under stress of just practicing, you know, to where you really can figure out, because some people carry multiple locations. Yes. So what am I carrying today? Is it appendix carry? Is it the 3 o'clock? So we bring training pistols in that they can actually practice over and over. And we always move towards someone's actually going to draw on them. So the big part of it is actually picking up the pre-draw indicators to know, is it time to like move offline or do something else, play it off? Are you with your family?
Yeah. Well, those are really great things to consider. So what are you first, I mean, where are you starting people? Like literally just with the draw stroke?
So seated position, can they get to their weapon?
Oh, I like that.
Right, because they're here and they're like, I have it in my pocket. And they're seated position. I go, okay, get it out. And they go like, I can't.
Yeah.
And I go, what do you do? Oh, I'm a long-haul driver, so I carry it in my pocket. You see the problem? That's not where you want to carry it.
Yeah.
So right away they start to...
We see that, right, where people carry in ways and in places, and they even carry certain guns sometimes, where they've never thought about where they are actually at for the majority of the day and how to do that.
Yeah, and a lot of times that's what they do. We're so used to doing everything from that standing position that we don't realize that most of these altercations come from, you know, not standing straight up on, you know, like on the range, man. A lot of them come from seated position, from our vehicles, you know, in restaurants, Starbucks or whatever, you know, and how would I get my pistol? You know, I got appendix draw, but I've never drawn from seated like this. You know, how do you actually do that? Move offline and stuff like that all at the same time with all those key areas of survivability.
Yeah. Wow. That's good stuff. So I'm curious how you structure a class of, what, 140?
Well, we had 120.
Or whatever it was.
We kind of divided into where, like, one person has a training pistol. The other one will actually hold a target for them, like almost like a focus mitt, to where they present it, and they have to draw and put rounds on targets, and then we allow them to switch. So it gives them a chance to practice back and forth. And a lot of them, they just like the practice of drawing by itself. Yeah, that's a big part of it.
Because too many people probably don't actually get that practice, and maybe don't even know what or how to practice it correctly. It would be my guess.
That's a big thing too, just like dry practice. You know, I mean, a lot of people really don't understand how dry practice is. You talk to them, they go, "Oh yeah, I can only do it for 10 minutes. It's so boring." And you're like, "Well, you're doing it wrong, man."
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and same thing with the draw. You know, what we find is that most people, because of the ranges, they can't even draw from those positions at the range. You know, they got to start with the gun on the bench and shoot. So how do you practice that? How do you train that? Because like you said earlier, if I can't get this gun out of the holster right now, it's really not doing me any good. It doesn't matter how good I can shoot, you know. If I can't get it out of the holster quick enough and get those rounds on, it's not going to help me. Yeah. So that's a huge important part of it. You know, it's like if I, you know, going into an MMA match and all I do is just shadow box and I never move against an opponent, and you know, I could be the best looking shadow boxer on there. Yeah. If I've never pressure tested it on anything, I really don't know what I'm going to do.
Right. Now there's chances are there's people watching that don't know exactly who you guys are, what your backgrounds are. But tell me a little bit about yourself, Gary, mainly for the viewers. Like, you know, what's the story, your life story?
Been in law enforcement about 20 years, over 20 years in law enforcement capacity. I've obviously done patrol. My SWAT team, I was our tactical team leader for my department. I went to narcotics as a narcotics detective, where I actually worked undercover for a little bit. I worked at the police academy as a primary instructor, one of the master of defensive tactics and master fire instructor in the state of Washington. Currently, I'm doing executive protection for a small tech company in Washington State.
Yeah.
I've been in martial arts since I'm basically about 5 years old, and I hooked in with Don as my sensei and main instructor about 25 years ago now. So
wow.
Been training about 25 years together. Being his throwing dummy for that long time.
How many times have you been thrown?
Today?
More than twice.
And you're a pretty good-sized dude too. So, but Don, I've seen move. I've seen, you know very well how to use one's weight, center of gravity, all that to your advantage. A little bit about your background, Don.
So I just retired after 33 years with the King County Sheriff's Office. So I'm retired, but I'm more busy now than I was when I was working. And I was fortunate to move up to a sergeant's rank, but been playing around in martial arts for a little over 50 years. So my big passion has been blending everything together, because in most departments you have the DT instructor, you have the firearms instructor, you have the taser instructor, bringing everything together to be more of a holistic instructor.
Yeah.
So, along the path of, different martial arts, we try to incorporate it into realistic training, and now kind of bringing it here. So we did a portion with weapon retention at close quarters, and we take it kind of for granted because our weapon's exposed all the time, and people can see it that they're going to go for it. But we thought, we better work on some stuff for concealment. And I was surprised after the first class, a woman comes up to me and she goes, "Oh, I really want to thank you for the class. My mom was murdered when her gun was taken away from her, and she was killed with it."
No kidding.
What do you say to that?
Yeah.
And she goes, "So thank you so much for these techniques." Kidding. So it was like, oh.
Wow. Yeah, I wish my mom knew that sort of thing.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So that's where our passion comes from.
And Don was with our system called A Wrestling. One of the big things, like Don said, is that we started looking at some of the dogma or some of the techniques that was being taught in police academies and across there, and going, well, let's pressure test these, man, because we've been teaching these because some manual tells us to. We talking to officers going, how many times have you used that technique? Well, I've never used that. How many times you use that? Well, I've tried it a few times and it's never worked. So we started going, well, let's pressure test these. Let's find out. Let's start developing stuff that really works. Like Don said, you're either a defensive tactics instructor or a firearms instructor. And those two areas they mostly clash, right? They don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
We're like, well,
so
these things are so interconnected that, we have to start blending these things. You can't just be good at one discipline and there and call yourself a professional. And then that was one of the things that we really start working on is integrating those two. When we're out sparring, we wear gun belts. No matter if we're just kickboxing or whatever, you can reach down and grab your gun. Now you're in a gun retention. And if you lose your gun, you either get a punch in the stomach or you give them from that put you out. So there's best penalties to it. But that also helped create to where we're going, well, this is the reality of what happens. Somebody grabs my gun. I'm not going to do this trap step blast. I could train it 100 times, 1,000 times, and right after class that happens. First thing happens, somebody grabs your gun. You just go, oh, shit, somebody grabbed my gun, and you just lock onto that arm. That's what majority of the people did. Whether they were trained or untrained, that's what the majority of people did when we really started. So let's develop something off of what people naturally do.
What people want to do, and then now how can you do it better? How can you do it effectively, right?
Right.
Yeah, what are some appropriate techniques for that? So, one thing that I see, I certainly do not have the background in law enforcement you guys have, and mine's I do have a background, just not nearly as long is primarily what it is. But one thing that, as I'm observing the law enforcement profession, and obviously a lot of things have gotten attention in the media, certain shootings and whatnot. Am I correct in analyzing some of these things where some things may not have happened the way they would have had certain, officers had skills besides just being able to use a gun?
Absolutely. So we call it like training to be calm and confident. So a lot of agencies don't get the training they need, right? When they leave the academy, they don't get additional training. Now we push them out on the street. They've been there 10 years. Situations happen. You're going to go back to your most either good dominant training or bad dominant training.
Yeah. So what's the most hours that cops get in the academy as far as like defensive tools?
Well, they break it down into different blocks. So firearms training would get a certain block. DT gets a certain block.
From what I've seen, firearms is the biggest block.
It's probably
most cases, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And so, what are you most likely to be proficient at? That's kind of my point. Is I see a lot of cops that are generally pretty proficient with the gun,
right?
But then after the academy, everything else just kind of falls by the wayside.
Yeah, it's what happens.
We go to a basic law enforcement academy, right? And then most agencies, when you train, they train at that basic level. They don't advance that training. They don't start integrating, what we do in patrol skills and all that kind of stuff, stress inoculations, right? Yeah. Doing stuff like Dom's talking about earlier, understanding what those pre-attack indicators, pre-attack positions are, so I don't put myself in that bad position where I have to react fast. I by knowing and understanding that, I can make better decisions.
Yeah.
I can move, to a safer location and make those better decisions off of that.
Yeah. So let's talk about positioning a little bit. As far as, you were just teaching some folks about, how to move, angles, all this stuff, right? So, walk us through some of the basics, some of the core principles with weapon retention, with getting a draw on recognizing a threat, being able to deal with that threat quickly and efficiently.
So we'll use the example of someone's approaching you, you're not sure what their intent is, and how they're standing, right? Where are you standing? Yeah. Are you standing in the kill zone right in front of them where they can punch you? What's your distance? If the person's going to attack me, can I move left or right? Am I with my family? So working on ahead of time, the pre-attack indicators, the pre-draw indicators, or is it time to disengage, right? Just be a good witness, back up and get to a safe place. But seeing those cues ahead of time. So in the class yesterday, we saw people that their ability to draw and get on target was actually faster, and it wasn't because they were faster on the draw. It was because they were faster on seeing the pre-draw indicators.
Yeah.
And we also had people that would pretend like they're drawing and then bring their hands up like this. And guess what? They didn't shoot them because they were faster on the recognition. They weren't panicking. So they go like, oh, I could see the person had a cell phone in their hand. So speeding them up in the front end makes it safer for everyone, whether you're a citizen or an officer.
Yeah. Wow. Good thoughts there. Mm-hmm. So what about, you mentioned a little bit ago, moving on the draw, before the draw.
Right.
So maybe you could give a little summary of what it is you guys are teaching your students on that as well.
So one of the things that we really found when we've done our stress training or we've done our our training there is that mobility is your key to survival. Yeah. It doesn't matter if I'm not moving, I could be the best shot in the world, but if I'm just standing there, and not moving, bullets travel real fast.
Yeah.
And you have to move. You have to get your head out of the way. We know most bad guys, when they come and rob you or attack you, that gun points directly in your face. If I'm so used to standing on the range and just doing this straight up draw, my survivability rates just went down.
Yeah.
We know it's actually better, even if you don't have a gun, just to take off running. So then we tell them the analogy in the class is, if I have you 10 yards out and I have you a target and you shoot 10 rounds, pretty good grouping for most of us, right? Yep. Now all of a sudden I take that target and I swing it back and forth. What starts happening in those rounds? Still 10 yards. What starts happening in those rounds? Now we swing it back and forth and we have it switch a few times. What happens to those rounds? Still 10 yards. Still the same line,
Yeah.
But what happens with that? So movement and mobility is really the keys to survivability, some of these things. Getting your head offline. We're so used to standing just straight up, doing that nice precision shot here, that people forget that when, in these competitions, man, that gun is aiming at my head. I want my head out that way.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we teach is that move first. I move first. I get out of that kill zone. I move. I can move and go to the draw at the same time. It doesn't have to necessarily be 1, 2, 3. It can happen in a real flow and motion. But getting the reps in and being able to do it, that's how you get that flow in there. So move the head first, move the body, get the body outside that kill zone. I'm drawing. And then from these close-in ranges, one of the things that we really stress is shooting up towards upper part of the chest into the head. Yeah. Especially law enforcement officers, we have a tendency to shoot right at that center mass, which is 10 rings right there, right?
Yeah.
Probably one of the worst places for a pistol around the hit. Yeah. Doesn't hardly do any damage. So we want them to start moving up here. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. We use the analogy in the class that if I hit somebody in the chest, it's like me taking a sundial.
Yeah.
Sand. What's that thing called?
Sundial. The sundial, isn't it?
No.
You take the sand and it goes underneath?
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm with you there, brother.
Okay.
I'm having a major brain fart.
It's digital.
So that sand thing, right? That sand thing you turn over and the sand rolls down, right? Yeah. I could hit somebody directly in the heart.
Yeah.
20, 30 seconds, people still living, right?
Totally.
And how many times can somebody press a trigger in that time?
Yeah,
you know?
plenty of times.
Like I said, average person, 3 or 4 trigger presses a second. 20 rounds, that's a whole mag somebody unloading on you. So by moving that target range and up, hitting that head, I hit the head, now it's like taking that light switch and just turning it right off. Even if it doesn't penetrate, just a good headshot, what does that do to that person's thinking? What does that do to the person's directional? All that kind of stuff in there.
Yeah, yeah. I read an article on a good friend of mine, his website, tier3tactical.com, Jake Jackson, and he had some statistics on his site in an article talking about the importance of moving and shooting and using cover, and talking about, like, if you just stand stationary, right, and you're trying to deal with that threat standing perfectly still, you're like 85, 86% likely of getting hit.
Oh yeah.
If you move and shoot, and move and draw, move and shoot, doesn't really matter. That goes down by half.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And the likelihood of taking a lethal hit goes from a much higher percentage down to like 11%.
Correct.
That's substantial just for shooting and moving. And then if you actually move and shoot and get to cover and use cover effectively, that lethality drops to like 5 or 6%.
And that's kind of what we found in our own training, our own statistics, when we brought officers out there and go, okay, there's a bad guy down at the end of the hall. It wasn't a green gorilla situation. We told him exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Bad guy down at the hall, he's going to have a shirt on, a plaid flannel shirt. You're going to get from this line to this line. Somewhere in there, he's going to draw on you and shoot. Let's see what you do. And we were surprised by how many officers just actually stood right there and tried to exchange rounds, even though there was cover to each side. How many officers started just moving straight back,
which is not much different than standing still.
Stand still, right? Yeah. I'm still right in that in that lane of fire right there. And like I said, even if they just moved, I mean, just flinch response offline.
Yeah.
You know, now they're taking hits, or non-lethal hits. You know, their survivability rates just skyrocketed just from them being able to move.
Yeah. Great. Well, we're getting close to wrapping it up here, but if I was to kind of summarize things based on discussion with you, it would be practice to draw, practice from positions that people don't typically practice, you know, other than standing stationary in a box at a static range, right? So sitting, awkward positions, on the move.
Laying down on the carpet watching TV. Can you get it out? You see where I'm going? Like you've been struck to the ground.
Yeah.
Can you get it? So those are perfect positions because in a
laying on your belly, laying on your back, on your side. Try all those things, right?
I'm laying in bed. I hear a strange sound. Yeah. Right now, where's it at? How do I get to it? Those are all the things that take into consideration.
Yeah, this is great stuff. And thank you for doing all you do to educate and get that information out to the masses. So this has been a pleasure talking with you, Gary and Don.
Thank you.